Hey guys, BJ the Brave here, back with another video for you. And today I want to do something a bit different. I wanted to share some thoughts I've been having about some changes that I'd like to see made in the game, and some ways in which I think the overall gaming experience could be improved. So, if you are a member of the community, you're probably on the Discord, and you'll see a lot of this talked about in the forums, talking about maybe cards that might need nerfing or certain cards that could do with buffing. But you'll also get a bit of sentiment around kind of where the factions are or what would improve the gaming experience. So I thought it'd be pretty cool to just kind of pull some of this thinking together really into a video. But I do want to emphasize this is just my thoughts. I'm pretty sure you're going to have better ideas, lots of different ideas, and maybe you agree with some of my ideas too. So what would be great is let me know in chat. I am going to tag Guild on into this as well, so never know, they might actually see it. So pop your ideas in the comments, and let me know what you agree with. Let me know what ideas you've got too. So the way I want to do this is I want to just start with some general thoughts and muses on the game experience overall, and then we'll probably go into like just a couple of things that I think could be changed about the factions. One thing that is quite encouraging for me, I mean, I'm someone who's played Hearthstone, I've played Gwent, I've played Rune Terror, I've played Tesla, I've played Marvel Snap. I'm trying to think the Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls, Legends. I've played all these. So, one of the things that I think is quite encouraging early on is when cards are quite powerful. We've seen recently in the nerf that Everguild aren't going to just hit them with the kind of nerf hammer. They're making more granular tweaks, and I do think that overall that's a better way of approaching when you're making card changes. But anyway, let's start with some of the general things that I want to see. So, for me, the first thing that I would like to see changed is a better ladder system. So right now, obviously, we have this leaderboard over here, and it just kind of like lists everybody from 1 to 50, nothing below that, and it just kind of says at the top whether you're in the epic division or the legendary division, and you kind of don't know why you're in that or when you're going to get into that. We know from Hearthstone, we know from Tesla, we know from most CCGs that getting legendary is like a really big aim of the season, and I think there needs to be a lot more made of that. You could even have something like Gwent where you actually qualified for the Pro League, which was their equivalent of becoming legendary. But then the goal within the Pro League actually changed somewhat. We're going to talk a bit more about that in a second. But I definitely think there needs to be a little bit more clarity around the different divisions and more incentive for climbing between them. And what I'd really, really love to see, and what I think would be fantastic, is, right now when we look at the leaderboard, what we've got is an awful lot of Space Marine players. There's a couple of Necrons, but they're mainly Space Marine players that are sort of dominating the top 10. And what I'd really love to see, especially at the top of the game, is something like what Gwent did, which is incentivizing players to play with like multi factions. So if I look at the top 5 players, I want to think that they're the best 5 players at the game, not the best 5 players at just the best broken deck in the game. So what Gwent did is you had to essentially play with 4 factions. So not every faction, but a handful of them, and post your best score from those 4, and your overall ladder position was an aggregate of those 4. It was really cool, and it meant that when you were playing at the top of the ladder, it wasn't just queuing into the same broken deck, and it helps mitigate game balance when there's always going to be a top deck, and it helps kind of like ensure that doesn't just completely take over, so you're just not playing that same deck time and time again. So I'd really love to see, particularly in the legendary division, some sort of incentive to to have to get good on and play multiple factions. I think what Gwent got right though is not perhaps doing that at the beginner levels, because it's a bit harsh. It's hard enough people trying to develop their collection, obviously, to to get a good deck. So it'd be a bit crippling for them. But certainly when you get to like the legendary division, the top of it, I think trying to reward people for playing a variety of factions would be really, really cool. Speaking of ladder, another thing that really has to change is the points that are attributed. So, if we look at the leaderboard, like right now, we've got Lionel Johnson who's top of the ladder. So basically, if he goes on and plays 10 games today, any game he wins, he's going to win like 10 points for a win. And then if he loses a game, because everybody's below him basically, that means that he's going to lose 40 points. Now, it's not quite that. Like if you play someone who's a bit closer, there's a bit of a scale there. But the point is that we're losing. You could have a 70% win rate and still lose points or not go up very much because you're losing 40 points for losing to players who are ranked a long way below you and only gaining 10 points for a win. So basically, what that does is it incentivizes what's called camping, which is one of the worst things in a CCG ladder, which is where people get to a certain rank and then they just kind of stop playing, basically. And also, no one wants that for the game. No one wants people to not play, actually be disincentivized for playing. I mean, that's just like nobody wants that, right? Evergirl does want that. The player who's doing well on ladder doesn't want that, and the competition who are looking for people to play it don't want that either. So, that's just that balance needs to change completely. I think the third thing change I'd like to see is around bots on ladder. So I've heard a lot of people saying we need to get rid of bots on ladder. Here's the problem: you get home, you think, right, okay, I'm going to play a bit of, I'm going to play a little bit of Warpforge, queue into ladder, and you're sitting there for 20 minutes trying to find an opponent. This is why, to me, you kind of need to have bots because until we have many more players sort of playing the game, the only thing worse than bots is not getting a game, not being able to get a game. And I think, therefore, bots probably are going to be part of a ladder system. However, what can absolutely change is why are we getting 33, 35 points for a win against bots? So again, right now, I mean, I don't even know, where am I? Right now, I am, 39th then. Okay, so if I play like these 38 players above me, I can get somewhere close to the same amount that I'd get for beating a bot. How does that make any sense? Meanwhile, if I beat someone who's below me, I'm getting like 10 points, probably maximum of 20. Again, 33, 35 points if I beat a bot. So how does that make any sense? So for me, it's like keep the bots in, but you make that the one that you only get the 10 points for the win. And I think that just making that change, along with the previous change that I mentioned about balancing wins and losses anyway, I think we get a much, much healthier and much more fun ladder to play. So my next change that I would really love to see, and I think would make this game much, much better, is actually to do with the shop. So in the shop, we obviously every day we get cards that come into the shop that we can purchase. You can actually see here, I just purchased the Broodlord for my Tyranid collection. Why are we running like common cards in the shop? I mean, come on, guys! Like all of the ways in which we're gathering cards through our campaigns and through packs and all the rest of it, like we're overflowing with common cards. Nobody wants common cards in the shop. No one's spending their crystals on common cards. The change I'd love to see in the shop, therefore, is I think that we should be green or better only in the shop. I am actually tempted to say it should only be epics and legendaries. I think that would make the shop really cool. But maybe the argument for new players to keep greens in there as well, possibly. Yeah, maybe we could do that. So I'd really love to see get rid of the commons, and I think that just makes the shop more interesting because every day at the minute I'm just looking at kind of one, maybe two cards. So all of this is irrelevant. So that's what I'm suggesting. The other thing that I think would be really cool, which is a feature that Marvel Snap do really well, which is that you can pin a unit. So right now, I only have 3,900 crystals. Let's say the Broodlord comes up and I really want the Broodlord. Obviously, I've purchased him here, but imagine I hadn't. What I can do is I can pin the Broodlord, which basically means that when the shop rotates in 24 hours, the pinned unit will stay there. So it gives me chance and time to save up my crystals so that I can then purchase the Broodlord. And that's a really, really great system. And it really gives me something to aim for when that legendary comes up that I want. I don't have to just wait 2 months for it to come back in the shop. So pinning like epic or legendary cards would be really cool. The other thing, just speaking of legendary cards, I really want to see if I just come on to, let's just go on to like legendaries, and Tyranids is what I'm collecting at the minute. So one of the things you probably heard me talk about, if you've seen my other videos, is to really wait till you finish like the premium campaign before you spend your legendaries. And the reason for that is because of duplications. And I think we could do, a bit of a design job here to make the user experience a bit more friendly. So, a couple of suggestions. One suggestion is that the game basically doesn't give you the option of a legendary that you've already got. So for me, any legendaries I open that are Tyranid, the game would be coded to ensure that I don't get a Winged Hive Tyrant or a Broodlord until I've got all other legendaries, and then maybe you could start to do duplicates. The only problem is obviously with Everguild's system here, with a trading in system on crystals, that might not work. The alternative suggestion, therefore, for me would be every time you get offered a legendary, that you actually get offered a choice of two. And that would ensure, oh, I don't want the Broodlord, I've already got that. I'll take the second option, which they gave me, which was, say, the Tyranid Prime. So I'd really love to see, one of those two changes implemented to make chasing legendaries is a real goal in this game, and all collectors are after that, and it's really rare and really difficult to get them. So I think getting rid of that duplicate on legendaries would really avoid a ton of frustration with the game and really help players to want to kind of collect. So there's some kind of like general changes to the game that I'd really like to see changed. The other one I was going to say was about the timer, but they've kind of made some changes, quite a few changes to the timer. Currently, there is a 15-second timer, and I've realized I'm not getting caught out as much as I used to do. So I'm kind of happy with that. Maybe I'll review that again in a few months. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about some of the factions. So first of all, I want to talk about Chaos. So the big thing for me with Chaos is I'd really like to see some of the big units reworked. We've got quite a few, when we think about Chaos and these big monstrosities, we've got some really cool artwork, some really cool cards. We've got the Mauler Field, the Hellbrute, the Obliterator, and these cards are just useless. Like who is, I'm dropping the Obliterator on turn 7. I appreciate it's a common card, but it does nothing. And one of the issues that Chaos have right now is when you're sort of trying to build a deck, is that really once you get over 6, 6 energy, none of the units are really worth playing. They're all way, way too slow. So I'd really love to see some rework to some of the big units to make them definitely have more impact on the turn that they arrive, and actually act more like a finisher, like a top end of a curve, like they should do. You think about the impact of Tomb World in Necrons and Angels of Death 7-drop in Marines, or even like some of the Dreadnoughts in Marines are really good top end. Rock Invasion in the Orkz. There's what's the 8-drop flyer for Eldar? That coming down with crystals is really powerful too. So I just really want to see some of these big units reworked so that we can kind of build decks and have a better curve and have some actual top end in the chaos list. And the other thing I think with Chaos for me is that the faction just feels a little bit too reliant right now on the Dark Pact mechanic. And the Dark Pact mechanic is very fun. This card is pretty good, for example, where you play the card and on the turn you play it, it immediately gets a Dark Pact. However, most of the cards, you have to play a unit and then put the Dark Pact from a stratagem essentially onto the unit. And the problem with that is, if it goes off, great. But the problem is that if your opponent clears your board, it's really difficult right now for Chaos to get a footing back in the game because they always need to play the unit and then play the Dark Pact. So you can often end up with loads of stratagems in your hand and no units because they've all been killed by the enemy. Or instead of playing the 3-drop unit on 3, you have to wait until energy 4 or 5 turns so that you can actually combine it, and that just ends up slowing down the tempo of the deck. So I think for me, what I'd like to see is a little bit more instant ability to play Dark Pact. But I also think the faction's suffering from being too Dark Pact reliant. Where are the other mechanics? I think that some sort of new mechanic which doesn't rely on Dark Pact and perhaps doesn't need that kind of synergy that I just described would really add quite a lot to the faction. I also would love to see some hard removal in Chaos. I just think it's quite in keeping with the theme. I'm thinking about like a Will of Gork type of ability, perhaps a little bit cheaper, but what it does is instead of just removing everything from the board, it turns everything into like a 1/1 spawn. I think that would be really good because if you're behind on board, you could play this removal that it doesn't, you're still behind, right? Because they've got more 1/1s than you, but they're not, the big powerful units that are going to kind of win the game next turn. I think something like that would be really, really cool for Chaos. So either way, I'd like to see a bit more removal. Okay, so let's talk next about the Tyranids. So let's get rid of Chaos in here. So the Tyranids. So the thing is for Tyranids is again similar to Chaos. They struggle a little bit with removal, and they obviously can build these huge units, these spiraling units, or they can play like stealth units that can't be interacted with. But as soon as a unit is removed with Tyranids, they kind of struggle a little bit to get a footing in the game again. I think some of the units really suit flank in the Tyranid faction, and I think things like the Ravener, for example, and some of the, even just from a lore perspective, that really suits the idea of flank attack. So I think, yeah, something like the Ravener. So I think they could do with a couple more flanking units to help with the removal, and maybe even some sort of hard removal. I think I was thinking with Tyranids something where maybe they kind of like consume their own unit. So you kill one of your own units to then kill another unit, or something like that. So again, flanking and removal is kind of what's lacking in the Tyranids for me. I'd also kind of like to see a little bit of a buff to the Horde mechanic. So Tervigon and the Gaunts, they're just a little bit. Yeah, there needs to be something that kind of enables that. It's a great mechanic. It's a great archetype, but it just needs a little bit of help to either some buff to stats or some way of sort of speeding it up, maybe. Okay, so let's talk next about Space Marines. So Marines are in a pretty good place at the minute. The one of the changes I'd really like to see in Marines is around this guy. So what I don't understand, this card is insane. This card, I think, wins Marines more games than anything because it just cheats tempo so definitively. And what I don't understand is for 1 mana, you get to choose which unit you blind. But the 4-drop, which you're paying 4 mana for, Electus, has a similar ability, but actually it's Codex, so you have to have played out your stuff evenly, and it blinds a random enemy, not one that chooses. So for me, one of the changes I'd like to see is kind of a bit of a swap in their abilities in terms of the randomness. So I think this guy, if he meets the Codex and you pay 4 energy, I think he should be able to choose the enemy, or maybe you give him Rally and he blinds an enemy, and then with the 1-drop, make that the kind of Codex ability that is random. And I think making that random would kind of balance it a little bit, because right now for me, for a one cost, this is just an auto include, and it's so powerful. It is broken, I think, and I think it's one of the things that would really help balance the Ultramarines. Next change I'd like to see with Marines is I think they recently nerfed armored support, and armored support's quite cool. Like, we're trying to if you're trying to make this vehicle build, which is an archetype there for Marines, it's just not quite working at the minute, and I think they went a bit too far with this nerf. So what I'd kind of like to see here is just, I don't know, make it two, maybe it costs two instead of three. I just really like to see them bring this card back in a bit because it's pretty cool, being able to put a vehicle in your hand slightly discounted. But I think at 3 mana, for only a one cost discount, I think it's just gone a little bit too far. So I'd like to see a change to that. And really, the last thing for Marines for me is I would love to see a Sakaris rework. I think this card is just not working. They just tried to change it, and it's still not played. Completely useless. It's so expensive, and it's a legendary card. And I just think it should be having much more of an impact as a finisher if it's going to be 9 mana. Maybe we make it cheaper, but I think it needs an actual reworking of its ability. So yeah, I don't know what. Maybe it could be almost like a giant version um, of the company Ancient. Maybe instead of giving +1/+1, it gives +3 across the board. So it's a real finisher. But it doesn't have to be that. It just needs some kind of rework because right now this ability is not cutting it. Something that impacts the board as well. Again, when we're playing 9 and 10 mana cards, it's got to impact the game immediately. So for me, that is the change I would like to see to the Marines. So let's talk a little bit about Eldar next. So some of the changes for Eldar. The first thing I'd like to see change for Eldar is this guy. Legendary leader, and unfortunately, he's probably the worst. Well, he's not probably, he is the worst, and I think that's just never good when it's the legendary card. It should be the one that you are striving for, and it says give Shuriken 1 this turn to your warlord or friendly vehicle. I think it's just a little bit underwhelming for 2 mana. Obviously, he's got the 40 health, but all the legendary ones do. So his ability itself needs a bit of a buff and a bit of a rework, perhaps. Okay. Next up, I would say with the Eldar, the biggest thing, I think the Eldar, a lot of the cards are in a decent place, but I mean, this is perhaps from someone who used to be a big collector. I think one of the big things I really want to see change is this guy. It's the Avatar. It's the Avatar of Cain. He's so central to like the lore, and he just should be a really cool card. And he's just meh. No one's playing this card, and obviously it's quite cool in a draft build. Some cards are designed with obviously draft in mind more than like a constructed mode. But I just don't know. Again, I'd like to see the Avatar do something a bit more impressive than this. Even almost like a built-in AoE. So instead of this blast 4, maybe something like he does, 2 damage, which is like the Wailing Doom, comes down and does, shoots firebolts off his sword and does 2 damage to everything on the board. Something. There needs to be something, again, 9 mana, something that impacts the game instantly. They're the key things I'd like to see change with Eldar. And also similarly with Orkz, I think their legendary leader Ghazghkull Thraka. I mean, he's the mighty war boss of the Orkz. Again, this guy is suffering. His ability seems quite fun on paper, but actually in reality, it's very much like a win more mechanic because to benefit from this, you've got to have units down on the board, right? Which means your opponent hasn't removed them. And again, when you're playing back and forth and you're removing their cards, they're removing your cards, often this ability just does nothing. It also does nothing on the first turn. I actually think that's a good thing to think about with all of the Warlord talents is can it do something on the first turn? And apart from the stratagem you can play that gives you 2 kind of grots for free, this ability does nothing on the first turn. I always think that's really bad design. So I'd really love to see this one get a bit of a rework. It's Ghazghkull, for God's sake. We should be seeing this guy. He should be like a feared warlord. Right now, he's just not. So I'd love to see that reworked. And the last but not least, the last thing I would really love to see is unstable. So unstable at the minute is just It makes me want to cry. I really want to try Orc vehicles. It's a really fun archetype. We should be seeing Orc vehicle builds, but right now with unstable, it's doing 0 to 3 damage to adjacent units. That's just too. It's too punishing. Now, often we want to take RNG out of the game, and it'd be good, even if it said it did 1 damage to adjacent units, then we could plan around it a little bit more. But it's not very orky. Maybe it should do, 0 to 3 damage to one of your units, one of their units. I don't know. But right now, this unstable, I don't even want to call it ability. It's a consequence. It's too crippling, and it's basically meaning, sadly, very very sadly, that we're not seeing orc vehicle builds, which is super sad. And I really really think this should be quite high up of all the faction changes that I've talked about. I think unstable really needs addressing so that we start seeing vehicles in orcs again. If you want to keep it as it is, then we need to see much bigger buffs, I think, across the board, because the 0 to 3 is just too punishing. So there we go, guys. There we have it. For me, I've talked about some things that I think would make the game better in general, and then I've gone through a few faction buffs or nerfs. Let me know in the comments what do you agree with from the things that I've talked about. Are there any other things that you would really love to see change that you think would improve either the gaming experience or just the balance of the game? If you like this kind of stuff, then again, please press the like button for me below. It really helps. And why not subscribe if you haven't already done so? I've had quite a lot of subscribers this month, so really big thanks if you already have. But if not, then follow along. I'm going to be doing lots of Warpforge content, so you'll get the notification when they come in, and we can build this community together. So again, thanks for all your support, and I'll see you in the next one.